Team Lotus, I think, well, team, really, it's extraordinary what this group of people have achieved.
A 180 kilómetros de Londres se encuentra Hethel, un pequeño pueblo que en los 60 y 70 albergó los secretos más codiciados de la Fórmula 1.
The other realization that the stiffness of the engine was greater than the stiffness of the chassis.
En la vieja fábrica de Lotus, el penetrante olor a gasolina de competición se mezcla con el sonido de las herramientas, los coches aún magullados o las tablas de tiempos escritas a mano. Es un viaje en el tiempo, a una época tan peligrosa como fascinante, y en la que un equipo se elevó por encima del resto.
Casi desde sus inicios, Lotus lideró el desarrollo técnico de la Fórmula 1 gracias a un hombre cuyo nombre está ligado a la fundación de esta marca. Este es su santuario, aquí creó parte de su magia, y aquí hemos venido para descubrirla de parte del hombre que mejor la conoce.
So I'm the son of Colin Chapman and the managing director of Classic Team Lotus.
Bienvenidos a los clásicos de Soy Motor.
First of all, Clive, thank you very much for having us here in one of the most treasured places in motorsport history, although it is not where the history of Lotus began.
That began in London, yes, and in a little lock-up garage in North London. And my father, with a lot of support from my mother, started from a very small beginning.
En 1952, Colin Chapman y Colin Dare fundaron Lotus Engineering, y 6 años después la compañía compitió por primera vez en Fórmula 1. Fue en Mónaco, con Cliff Allison y Graham Hill al volante de dos Lotus 12, el primer monoplaza de toda la historia de la marca. 33 carreras después, Lotus consiguió su primera victoria como equipo de fábrica. El honor le correspondió a Innes Ireland en el Gran Premio de Estados Unidos de 1961, y lo hizo a manos de un Lotus 21. El sucesor del 21 fue el Lotus 24, un coche con un motor Coventry Climax de 1500 centímetros cúbicos y chasis tubular. Colin Chapman lo había creado para vendérselo a los equipos privados mientras él desarrollaba su arma secreta. El Lotus 25, con su revolucionario chasis monocasco.
That changed motorsport design overnight. The space frame chassis was removed from the car and the fuel tank became the chassis. The frontal area of the car was reduced significantly, the weight of the car, big increase in torsional stiffness.
Debutó en Zandvoort en 1962. No era la primera vez que se intentaba hacer un chasis monocasco, pero Chapman había dado con la clave.
The torsional stiffness for very lightweight, whereas previously when it had been attempted it hadn't necessarily realized the benefits without more weight and less stiffness, so it was just very simple.
Y junto con el Lotus 25, 1962 vio nacer a la segunda estrella que marcó una época para Lotus. Jim Clark, un joven escocés tan tímido fuera de pista como certero dentro de ella, se convirtió en el piloto estrella de Lotus, algo más que un simple conductor para Colin Chapman.
My father certainly had a special relationship with Jim Clark, but I think my father respected other drivers as well, but Jimmy seemed to have a natural talent which took him a little bit beyond. He was very sympathetic for the machinery and was very good at finishing. Often when he finished he was winning as well. But also, as you say, he was able to interpret what the car was doing and communicate with my father in a way that maybe it wasn't necessary for my father to be driving anymore. And that was an important thing because my father was so busy, he couldn't really afford the time to do the driving as well.
El título se le escapó en el 62, pero no al año siguiente. Clark y su Lotus 25 solo se dejaron por ganar 3 carreras. No pudo repetir la gesta en el 64, pero sí al año siguiente, cuando el Lotus 33, una evolución del 25, le otorgó 5 victorias y el segundo título de campeón. Y entonces la puta manía de la Fórmula 1 de cambiar las reglas, que no lo digo yo, seguro que lo pensaba Chapman. De repente se decidió que los motores aumentaran de capacidad hasta los 3 litros, y esto pilló a Chapman con el pie cambiado. El movimiento le obligó a montar un motor BRM tan pesado como poco fiable. Lotus necesitaba una revolución. Y esta llegó con el Lotus 49 y el motor DFV de Cosworth, que se usó como parte integral del chasis.
Well, really, it kind of first came about, I guess, with the BRM engine, really. Tony Rudd realizing that if you could have all the fuel in the front half of the car, then you didn't need to have side tanks extending to the rear. The other realization that the stiffness of the engine was greater than the stiffness of the chassis. They were tasked with designing the DFV. It became clear at that point that because the volume of the engine was so much bigger because it was a 3-litre engine and wider. Effectively, suddenly it was the same width as the car, so let's bolt onto the front of the engine and take the gearbox and the rear suspension off the rear of the engine.
El 49 ganó en su primera carrera, pero quedaban cosas por ajustar. Básicamente la entrega de potencia del motor de FV, que era una auténtica pesadilla para Jim Clark.
It was quite on, off, and the increased horsepower at a time when the drivers still were not strapped in.
Yeah.
They found they were actually being moved up and down inside the cockpit to the extent that the cars were fitted with panels which sat on top of their shoulders
To avoid them from...
to avoid that up and down inside the tub. And really seatbelts were introduced more because the driver wanted to be held into the car to overcome this problem. It really was not for safety.
Superados los problemas de manejabilidad, el 49 cumplió con su cometido, ganar. Lo hizo en la primera carrera de 1968, con doblete de Clark por delante de Graham Hill. La confianza del escocés en Chapman y sus frágiles Lotus había decaído, pero el 49 parecía el arma perfecta para que Clark se hiciera con el tercer título. Nunca pudo hacerlo. Un extraño accidente en una carrera de Fórmula 2 en Hockenheim acabó con la vida del piloto más talentoso de su época. Clark solo tenía 32 años. Chapman quedó destrozado y el futuro del equipo en el aire.
It was a real trauma for my father, and yes, my father did contemplate stopping racing, according to my mother.
La muerte de Clark colocó de nuevo la seguridad de los Lotus en entredicho. Chapman desapareció durante una semana entera, pero Lotus tenía demasiada fuerza como para detenerse.
It was extraordinary how the team in particular were able to reapply themselves to going racing, initially without my father. You know, the mechanics and Graham Hill took a very significant role in leading the team back to the Spanish Grand Prix, which they won. And you know, at about the same time, my father realised things had to continue.
Lotus pasó página y Chapman volvió manos a la obra con sus invenciones.
Wedge shape, gas turbine, four-wheel drive.
Antes de dar con
One of the, if not the great Formula One cars.
el Lotus 72. El coche parecía simple, pero tenía novedades importantes. Forma de cuña, radiadores laterales, un enorme alerón trasero. Inicialmente su rendimiento no fue bueno, pero unas modificaciones en la suspensión le permitieron explotar su mayor ventaja, aprovechar al máximo el agarre de los neumáticos.
Basically what the 72 was able to do, especially with its rising rate suspension, was to make a soft tyre last for the whole race, and that was its really big performance advantages. Sure, maybe it had a little less drag because of the hip mounted radiators, maybe it had a little bit more downforce because of the efficiency of the wings and the quality of the airflow because of the wedge shape, but most importantly it was making a soft tyre last longer.
Esa capacidad convirtió al 72 en el coche a batir. En su primer año, 1970, Lotus se hizo con el título de pilotos y también de constructores gracias a Jochen Rindt. El austriaco era la nueva sensación de Lotus. Se unió en 1969 y aunque no congeniaba especialmente con Chapman, su talento le valió para ser el piloto estrella del equipo. En el 70 Rindt ganó 4 carreras de forma consecutiva, desde Holanda hasta Alemania, y aunque se retiró en su gran premio local, llegó a Monza con posibilidades matemáticas de ser campeón del mundo. Y entonces, la tragedia volvió a golpear a Lotus. En la última sesión de entrenamientos, en la curva de la parabólica, un problema en los frenos lanzó el coche contra un guardarraíl mal instalado. Rindt murió casi en el acto. 3 carreras después, su esposa, Nina Rindt, recibió el título de campeón de su marido, el único póstumo en la historia de la Fórmula 1. El Lotus 72 había nacido con una mancha negra, pero pintó de dorado el palmarés del equipo. En 1972, Lotus consiguió el título de constructores y pilotos con Fittipaldi al volante, y en el 73 repitieron campeonato de constructores. Se llegó a estrenar hasta una especificación F del coche, pero con el paso de los años, el monoplaza quedó obsoleto.
The 72 was no longer a championship winning car, not even by the end of its life, in Ronnie Peterson's hands. Was he the future of the team? Maybe the new Jim Clark?
Well, Ronnie was a completely different type of driver, I think. Probably Mario was closer to Jimmy. Ronnie was give me a car and I'll go as fast as anyone possibly can, whereas Mario was more a development driver. And there used to be a little bit of, although they got on tremendously well as teammates, there used to be a little bit of a problem when Mario would develop the setup, and then Ronnie would say, right, we'll have Mario settings, and then Ronnie would go quicker. That made life a bit awkward.
Lotus necesitaba una nueva genialidad de Chapman para recuperar la gloria, y Colin no defraudó. De repente, apareció una nueva palabra en el diccionario de la Fórmula 1, efecto suelo.
Yes, there was a certain amount of luck because Peter Wright was investigating aerofoil section side fuel tanks. Instead, discovered ground effect, which is completely opposite. There's nothing to do with the aerofoil section. It's to do with the air flowing between the underside of the car and the circuit. And yes, there was I guess, an element of luck. Someone was going to discover it one day, but happily we did.
Adivinad qué, el coche no era competitivo en las primeras carreras, pero luego se evolucionó y acabó dominando. Sí, la historia de siempre.
It was all down to the skirts. Initially it showed promise and the drivers liked the car. Quite quickly the team realised that making that seal between the low pressure air under the car and the high pressure air outside of the car, that was crucial. Eventually the team came up with the parallelogram skirt and tested at Snetterton, and Gunnar Nielsen came back in and said, "What have you done?" Because he was suddenly 2 seconds quicker.
And the 79 proved that improvement, Andretti and Peterson fighting for the championship.
Yes, absolutely. Mario was number 1 and Ronnie was number 2, so that was clear. And Ronnie was very honourable about that. And we had a number of 1-2 finishes, which were very unusual in those days. Teams often didn't have the resources to run 2 frontline drivers and cars.
Andretti y Peterson llegaron a Monza como únicos aspirantes al título de 1978. Durante los entrenamientos, Peterson tuvo un accidente que destrozó el 79, por lo que tuvo que correr con el 78, más lento y también frágil. Y en la salida, Ronnie Peterson se vio envuelto en un accidente múltiple. Sufrió múltiples fracturas en las piernas y aunque fue trasladado plenamente consciente al hospital, falleció por complicaciones tras ser operado. Tony Rudd, ingeniero de Lotus, dijo a posteriori que Chapman estaba furioso con los mecánicos porque creía que si se hubiera reparado a tiempo el 79, Peterson habría sobrevivido al choque.
Yeah, I mean, it was an accident, and it was a big impact. And the front in those days, racing cars really, until carbon fibre came along, aluminium monocoques just weren't as strong as carbon fibre. So it was a big accident, and I think my father would become frustrated if he felt the team could have done better. And I think he was obviously devastated that Ronnie had died. And in those circumstances, maybe you get emotional and what have you. But I'm sure that in retrospect, absolutely, that would not be his opinion.
Andretti se hizo con el título en 1978, el último para Lotus, y desde ese año el equipo empezó su declive.
What did happen was the car business was extremely difficult, and the FISA Focus situation developed.
Yeah, the ban, for example, in the 2 chassis car.
That was a real blow. Also, the budget of Formula One was developing, and commercial sponsorship was increasing all the time, and a lot of things were building up. And my father was still very much an individual leading Lotus, and maybe that was at a time when Lotus was getting so big that it was increasingly difficult for an individual to be able to manage the whole situation. So I think, it wasn't one thing, it was a lot of factors.
Uno de ellos fue el fraude de DeLorean, un escándalo de evasión de impuestos que salpicó directamente a Colin Chapman. Su vida familiar y personal cada vez se estaban mezclando más. En las carreras, Lotus no ganaba. Tras el título de Andretti en el 78, el equipo no volvió a vencer hasta 1982. Lo hizo Elio De Angelis, en Austria, al volante de un Lotus 91, uno de los primeros Lotus en construirse en fibra de carbono y el último coche de carreras que diseñó Colin Chapman. Pero la presión era demasiado intensa y el 16 de diciembre de 1982, el equipo y Clive quedaron huérfanos.
Was there a moment in which you thought, okay, this is it, this is the end of Team Lotus?
No, not really. I was only 20 years old and still at university, and my father's colleagues were capable of managing the situation, and my mother decided to continue with Team Lotus. She was effectively the principal at that point. It was fantastic that together, even without my father, they managed to realise Grand Prix victory again, with some help from Ayrton.
La llegada de Senna fue un oasis en medio del desierto que atravesaba la escudería. Con el brasileño, Lotus consiguió 3 victorias en el 85 y fueron terceros en el campeonato de constructores en 1986 y 1987. Senna empujaba, pero el equipo no acababa de despegar.
I think Lotus struggled somewhat because my father wasn't there to take the risks, if you like, financially as much as anything, and design-wise. And so, although the team did well, maybe the leadership of the team was a little bit cautious. Whereas at the same time, in particular, McLaren and Ron Dennis was being bold and really pushing on and pushing forward, and they kind of went ahead, and we kind of veered off a little bit.
Senna, in sporting terms, he was a success for Lotus. Was he such a success in the economical term?
Well, I guess Ayrton, was expensive, but I think well worth the investment. Like I said earlier, I think it wasn't his fault that maybe the team was slightly under-resourced, both in terms of money and in terms of courage to take those big steps. Ayrton did not hold the team back.
Con la marcha de Senna en 1988, el equipo tocó fondo. Ese mismo año, Piquet consiguió el último podio de Lotus y la familia Chapman se desentendió de la escudería a finales de 1990.
Peter Collins and Peter Wright did realise some good cars, in a really difficult situation. They found it even harder than we did, and frankly, we didn't help them a great deal. I think our attitude was, well, we've given you this opportunity, although they had to pay for it, but it's up to you to make the best of it. And 1994, the car was pretty good, and they had the Mugen Honda engine, and famously the Italian Grand Prix, and Johnny getting punted off at the chicane. So it wasn't a shambles. It was a professional effort.
Yeah.
But then, unfortunately, it just, Formula One dipped, and they just got caught in the dip. Others managed to scramble out, but sadly they didn't.
Y así, el equipo que dominó la Fórmula 1 en la década de los 60 y 70 desapareció sin pena ni gloria. Una triste despedida para un grupo de pioneros, una familia que a base de esfuerzo marcó una época en la Fórmula 1.
In a positive team atmosphere, it's incredible what you can achieve, I've found. And looking back at the 60s, you just think, how did 8 people manage to run sometimes 3 cars, driving to all the circuits, when there was no emails and probably no phone calls either, and driving to the circuits in the transporter. 20 years after modifying the Austin 7, my father was at Indianapolis with a wedge-shaped gas turbine 4-wheel drive rocket ship. And I just love on my desk I have a model of the Austin 7 and the 56. It's just 20 years and you can't believe it.
It's 2 worlds.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Clive.